is part 2 of my 3-part Tableau tips series, brought to you by the Information Lab. Last week, I took you through the first 20 tips that I had from the Tableau conference a couple weeks ago out in Las Vegas. And today I'm going to take you through some more of those, and we'll see how far we get in the next about 45 minutes. And then there'll be another one of these next week. So if you want to sign up for any of the future webinars we have coming up, if you go to the informationlab.de, you can see it in my browser window on the upper left. If you go to the informationlab.de, that's our German team's website, and then click on the events link, you'll see all of the upcoming webinars in this series. So I have another part coming up next week on October 31st. That will be part 3 of my tips series. And then on November the 10th, Chris Love will be talking to everybody about Tableau Advanced Visualizations with Unions. And then Craig Bloodworth will be wrapping up the series on December the 5th with the future of mapping in Tableau. Both of those sound like fantastic sessions, so please be sure to join those as well. We've had a great response so far, and hopefully you are all enjoying these webinars. But you're here to see some tips, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to be able to include some divider lines in my visualization. And this has changed a bit in Tableau 10.4. I'm actually using Tableau 10.3 in this version for this demo. So let me show you how I would have done this in Tableau 10.3. So there's a couple of different ways. So for example, I may want to put a line underneath of this. So here's my quarterly sales. I may want to divide this view into several different sections. So putting a line in between the quarterly sales and the big numbers, and then another line between the quarterly sales and the profitability by state. There's a couple ways you can do that. One way is to take a text object, and as long as all of your sheets are in a container, I can drop it in between the big numbers and the line chart. And when I do that, it tells me to enter some text, but I'm not going to enter anything. I'm going to just hit OK on the bottom right. And notice how I just have a blank box. Well, all I need to do is click on the little caret on the upper right-hand corner of my blank sheet and go to Format Text Object. On that Format Text Object section, I'm going to go ahead and click on the shading, the middle option, and I'm just going to choose a light shade of gray, something like that. And now I've got a real thick border, and all I need to do is click on the little caret again on that section and edit the height. So if I make it 1 pixel high, you'll see I get a nice thin line in there, really like that. But if I want to make it a bit thicker, all I have to do is just change the height. So if I make it 2, you'll see I get a slightly thicker line, or if you want maybe a 4 pixel wide line, you just do 4. So lots of options there. I like mine to be 1 pixel high. Okay, so that's one option. The second way that I could do it is by actually using images. So what I do is sometimes I will come into PowerPoint, and let me just do a new slide here. And let me delete these. And I'll go into PowerPoint and I'll just draw a shape. So just draw a straight line, something like that. Hopefully it's nice and straight. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes with PowerPoint. And then I'll go ahead and format this line. So in PowerPoint, when I format this line, I'm going to go ahead and, let me click on the format pane. Here we go. And what I can do is I can make this line nice and thick. So let me move that out of the way. And I can make this line as thick as I want. So let's say I make it 3 pixels wide. I could change the color. Maybe I want it to be a light gray. And I can even make it a dashed line. So let's say I want to have a dashed line between these sections. So I'll pick that. And then all I have to do is save that as an image. So I'm going to save that as a picture. I'm going to save it in my Tableau repository because that's where I save all of these. So I'm going to call it dashed gray line and hit save. And now when I go back to Tableau, I can actually drop an image object in here in between the quarterly sales and the profitability by state. When I do that, I'm just going to navigate to my Tableau repository, pick my dashed gray line, and hit open. And notice how Tableau doesn't quite look the same as it did in PowerPoint, but all I need to do is go ahead and hit the little triangle on that image again, and choose Fit Image, and then choose center image. And now I have that line, but it's got lots of space, right? So from there, I just play with the height again. So if I make it 1 pixel wide, I get a nice, the line gets really tiny. You see how it didn't spread all the way across the view. So my option there is either go back to PowerPoint and make it wider, or I could just change the height, and maybe if I make it 4 pixels high, now I get a nice little gray divider line. Now, so the images, you can see it looks a bit blurred, so it just depends on your personal preference. So you can either do an image or you can do a text box. Okay. So in this particular example, what I want to be able to do is, first off, why don't we go ahead and make this a % of total visualization. So I'm going to go ahead and change my sum of sales. I like these as stacked bars so they're a bit easier to read. So I'm going to go ahead and add a quick table calculation for a % of total. And then I'm going to go ahead and change that to compute using, and I'm going to go edit table calc. And I want to do it for each product subcategory. So for each product subcategory, calculate the % of total by region. Okay, it's stacking up going across like I want. Excellent. So let's close that. All right, so now that I have the visualization like this, what I might want to do is highlight one of the regions. So for example, if I want to highlight the west region, I could click on the west, and you see it's highlighted nice and neat, right? All you have to do is to click on this little highlighter up here on the upper corner on your color card. And if I turn that off, notice how when I click, it doesn't do anything. So click on that highlighter first. And then what I could do is in the west, maybe I want to go ahead, and this is now the color palette that I want to use going forward. So this is almost like highlighting the west and pushing all of the other regions to the back for context. So if I want to do that, all I have to do now is click on the little triangle on my color legend. And there's this option here called Assign Highlight Colors to Palette. So if I click on that, now you'll see Tableau went ahead and assigned those colors and it resorted them for some reason. So I'm just going to move the west back down to the bottom. And now it's back on the left-hand side. What's neat about that is now if I do a new worksheet, and let's say I do product subcategory, and I put region on color, and let's just say 2015 sales on columns, notice how it retained that color legend. So that's like pre-assigning a color legend based on the highlighting. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do here is, let's say in this particular example, I only want to assign certain month. I want January to be red, and I want the rest of the months to be a gradual shade of blue. Okay, well, how would I go about doing that? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually drag month. I'm going to copy month with my command key on a Mac or control on a PC onto the color shelf. And notice how we get one color for a distinct color for each month. What I want to do is I want January to be red and I want the rest to be a gradual shade of blue. Okay, so let's double click on our color legend. And when we do that, we're presented with this option. So I'm going to click on January and then click on red. All right, but now how do I get the rest of the months to be a gradual shade of blue? Well, in my color palette, I do have this blue one built in. Even though this is a discrete color palette, it does go from light blue to dark blue. And I want to assign those as spread out as possible to February through December. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight February, hold my Shift key down and click on December. And now if I click on Assign Palette, look how Tableau just magically assigned the perfect distribution of colors to those 11 months. So Tableau figures out what colors to apply best and spreads those out from February through December because I had those highlighted when I clicked on Assign Palette. Hit OK, and there we go. I now have January in red and the rest of my months in a gradual shade of blue. All right, so this has happened to me before. I've been working with sales data, and all of a sudden we figure out that somebody in IT or in accounting had been, everything was off by a factor of 100. They decided that they wanted to kind of store things that way, to maybe to save space, whatever, who knows what reason they would do something like that. So really what I need to do is I need to take all of my sales figures and multiply them by 100, but I don't want to have to go back to all 60 some sheets that are in my workbook here and change those. So let me go ahead and quit. Some of these things are making noise. Sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new calculated field, and I'm going to call it sales corrected. And I'm just going to take sales and multiply every one of my sales figures times 100. Okay, so now I've got this sales corrected figure, and here I've got sales, and then I have sales. If I go back to my divider lines, I had quarterly sales here, so I've got it in these fields as calculations and all kinds of different things. But I don't want to have to go back to every sheet and update. I don't want to have to go back to every sheet and do something like this where I just replace it on the shelf. That would be quite boring. So the easy way to do it is to right-click on the field that you want to replace. So in this case, sales, down here in the measures area, down here on the lower left. So right-click on sales. Choose this replace references option. And then when this replace references box comes up, scroll down to your sales corrected, hit OK. And now every sheet is now updated to the sales corrected. So if I go back to my divider lines sheet here, and if I go here, you'll see it's updated to sales corrected. Or if I go to my sheet here, let's go to this sheet, you'll see everything has updated to sales corrected. Very, very good. Okay, even my formulas, so 2014 and 2015 sales, if I look at those, and I look at 2014 sales, you'll see it updated to sales corrected. Fantastic. Okay, so now it looks like I've got to do a bit of cleanup here, so I'm going to highlight both of those and change my default number format to millions. So let's do no decimals and do it in millions and hit OK. And that didn't quite work. I messed something up here. Let's format the measure values, and let's go to number and then make this millions. Okay, I'm messing something up somewhere. Anyway, we can fix it later. All right, so that kind of helps fix that problem there. So now our profitability is a mess because our profit is probably off by a factor of 100 as well. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to look at rounding numbers up or down. Okay, so I have this figure here, this chart here, that shows me the average days to ship to one decimal place. But really what I want to be able to do is I want to round these numbers. And what are the different ways we could round? Well, if we want to round down, I could just double click on my column shelf. And if I do round, and I do the average days to ship, and then it tells me how many decimals I want to round to. So I don't want to round to any decimals. So I'm just going to do (0) and hit enter. And what Tableau does in this case is it actually rounds to the nearest whole number. So notice how down here, so let me move my screen over a bit. Okay, notice over here, when we get 1.7 and 1.9, those rounded up to 2, and then everything else rounded down to 2. So it rounds to the nearest whole number. Well, maybe in my case, I want to say, you know what? If they didn't get, if anything is 2 point whatever, it should be 2 days. So in other words, the only thing that should be 3 days are ones that took more than 3 days to ship. So to do that, I can just use an integer function. So I could do an integer on the average days to ship and close that off. And look at that. So now that's the equivalent of a round down in Tableau. If I want to do a round up, I could use the ceiling function. So there's a function called ceiling, and then I could put the average days to ship inside of that. And that's going to be a round up. And there's one more. It's called floor. So floor will do the same thing as my integer one I just did a second ago. So floor will round down, if I can get it in there. And you'll notice how floor is the same thing as integer here. So integer and floor are the same. So that's 4 ways to do rounding depending on your use case. Okay, so in this particular example, I want to be able to label specific marks within a view. So let's go ahead and let's look at 2015 sales versus 2014 sales, maybe for each product. So let's put product name on detail. And if I go on the label shelf, I can go ahead and show mark labels, and maybe I want to put product name on label. And Tableau will display them the best it can, right? So it fits them based on what it thinks is the best way to display these. Okay, so, but I'm going to go ahead and turn off my mark labels for a second, and let me change my mark type to a circle. Great. And now I want to color these by my 2015 profit ratio. Okay, great. So actually, let's do it even one better. Let's just make these either orange or blue. So let's say 2015 profitable, and I'm just going to say my profit ratio 2015 is bigger than 0. So those would be the ones that are profitable. And now I get a true false. Let me stick that on the color shelf instead. Okay, so let me assign a few colors here. So the ones that are profitable, I want to be maybe that shade, and I'll leave the falses as orange and hit OK. And then let's just exclude the nulls for now, just to clean up the view a bit. All right, so now maybe what I want to do is I want to actually label only the specific outliers up here. So for example, this one had a lot of sales in 2015 compared to 2014, but it's not profitable. So to label a specific mark, I can click on the mark itself, right click, and choose Mark Label, Always Show. And there we go. We now have the product that was sold there. And if I don't like the way it's structured, I can move it around. I can just drag it around a bit. Oops. I need to go here again and allow overlapping, and there we go. Or I could take it here and maybe move it above this mark, and we know which one that is, right? Or maybe I want to label this one as well. So mark label always show, and that'll help us, label the marks depending on where they belong. So perhaps I will align these to the right and to the center. And then, yeah, so if I label any future marks, like maybe this one, mark label always show, you'll see it should be labeled. Okay, it's not labeled off to the right because we don't have quite enough space for the view. But yeah, again, if you want to label specific marks, just right click on those marks, go down to the mark label option and choose always show. Now, if I do reset position, you'll see Tableau tried to move it over to the right. So this reset position option is here because I manually dragged the label around. So hit reset position, and you'll see that one barely moved, so good to go. All right, so that's how you label specific marks in a view. How about bump charts? So everybody loves bump charts. So we're looking at our sales. So how does each state, so the question we're trying to answer here is how does each state in the East rank in each quarter? Okay, great. So the first thing we need to do in this case is we need to change our sales. Let's right click on that, and let's add a quick table calculation for a rank. All right, and we get something like that, and we want to make sure that this calculation is doing it for each quarter. So let's go to Edit Table Calc. So you notice now, because we have the calculation assistance turned on, Tableau shows us how this one particular state ranks. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to do it for each quarter. We want it to rank by state. So the way you would read this is you put the word for each before each of the unchecked boxes. So we say for each quarter, calculate the rank by state. All right, so that's how I would read that. Close the window. And now we've got all of our states ranked here nice and neat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this field by holding the control key down on a PC or command on a Mac. And I'm going to duplicate that on the rows. And now we have 2 line charts. Great. And I also have 2 items on 2 different fields on the marks card. So on the first one, I'm just going to force that to be a line. And on the second one, I'm going to change it to be circles. Okay, so now we can see what's going to happen here. I'm going to right click on this one and choose dual axis. And now if I right click on my axis, I should be able to choose synchronize. Great. So now we've got the makings of a bump chart, but my ranks are upside down. So I'm just going to double click on either one of the axes to bring up the edit axis window. And I'm going to reverse the scale. So that's this option down here on the bottom left, reverse the scale. Hit OK. And now if we, let's go ahead, I would go ahead and maybe hide the header here. And on my second marks card, let's make these circles a bit bigger. Okay, something like that maybe. And what I could do is on my label, I'm going to duplicate my rank onto the label shelf. And you see I'll put it out to the right of each one of those. I actually want it to be in the middle. So I'm going to click on my label shelf, go to the alignment and do center and center. I'm going to allow the marks to overlap, and I'm going to make the font a bit smaller to make sure that they all fit. And maybe I like Tableau Medium. That's my favorite. So I'm going to stick Tableau Medium in there. And you can see some of them are black because they don't quite have enough space. So maybe I just need to make my circles ever so slightly bigger. And there we go. Now I have a beautiful bump chart. And if I want to know which states are where, I could just turn on the highlighter for the state. So right click on state, choose show highlighter. And now I can pick a state from the list or just hover over them. And you'll see we've got this great little highlight action now. Really, really cool. So that's our highlighter. Okay. And that's how you create a bump chart. All right, in this next example, what I want to be able to do is I want to create a trend line, but for only a single state. So what happens here is if I go ahead and I go to my analytics pane and I drag on a trend line, you'll see this trend line represents the trend for all of the states. Now, I may want it to be for just one specific state. So I'm going to want to go ahead and take that trend line off. So to get the sales corrected for a particular state, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to actually create a parameter. So I'm going to right click on state and I'm going to choose create parameter. And I'm just going to say choose a state. And because I right clicked on state and chose show a parameter, Tableau automatically filled out the view, filled out the parameter for me. So I'm just going to hit OK. And now I'm going to create a calculated field because parameters don't do anything until you tell Tableau what to do with them. So first off, I'll show the parameter. And if I pick something, you'll see nothing really happens in my view, right? So nothing's really changing at all. So what I need to do is I need to create a calculated field, and I'm going to call this sales for selected state. I'm going to say if my state is equal to my parameter, then give me sales corrected, end. So I'm not putting an else in there because I want nothing to be returned for any of the other states. So hit OK. And now I should have a measure in here called sales for selected states. So let's throw that on the rows and see what we get here. Okay, so now we see New Hampshire here, right? And if I change this to a different state, you'll see that swap out. Great. And this null indicator is here because the rest of the states we said to return a null value for. So I'm just going to hide that indicator. Okay, so the next step is I want to go ahead and put this on the dual axis and then right click and synchronize. All right, so now we've got a selected state and it's highlighted, which I like, right? So maybe I'll double click on my color shelf here and let's go ahead and pick maybe let's assign maybe a light gray to the sales selected. And let's leave the other one at orange just for the heck of it. So we get something like that. But now I want to show a trend line for just the selected state. So if I go over to my analytics pane and I drag on a trend line, you'll see I now have an option for sales for selected state. So I want to drop my trend line on there and I can see the trend for Ohio. Or if I want to switch the state maybe to California, I can see my trend for California, or Illinois, or New Mexico, whichever state we want to pick. We've now not only highlighted that state, but we've also added a trend line for just that state. So pretty cool. What I would do to finish this up here is just to hide that header. And there we go. If we've got a nice clean view, this is showing a positive trend for New Jersey. All right, so in this next example, what I want to be able to do is to put KPIs next to these bars. I'm going to show you two different ways to do it. So, okay, so basically I want to say, I now have a field. I created a calculation for my profitable, if you remember, and that's just returning a true or a false. So if I drag that up here to the view, you'll see I've got true and false here, okay? Nothing particularly outstanding. But maybe I want to actually show that as a KPI. So let me take that back off as maybe a symbol or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double click in my column shelf, and I'm just going to set a field to say the average of minus 10,000 or something like that. I'm just judging that based on my scale here. I may have to play around with that number a bit, but I hit OK or hit Enter, and now I have this chart over here, right? So what I want to do on this particular bar chart is I want to change it to a shape. And I don't want to color it, so let's, or maybe we can color it, it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to click on my shape shelf, and what I want to do is I want to take my 2015 profitable and put that on the shape. All right, so now I've got circles for false, and I have squares for true, but maybe I want something else. So let me double click on that shelf. And if I go down to maybe my KPIs here, so my false would be the unprofitables. So maybe I want those to be an X, and I want my profitables to be a check mark, something like that, and hit OK. And now I can make these maybe a bit bigger so we can see them better. Now we could see which ones are profitable and by how much. If you don't want them color-coded, you could just drag them off, not a big deal. And if I were to do that, I might choose a different palette. So let's leave the color on there for now. Okay, or better yet, let's just stick our profitable onto the color. And let me switch this around. So we want profitable to be blue and unprofitable to be false. We get something like that. Okay, but this isn't quite what I want. So what I need to do now is I need to make this dual axis by dragging it down just above the 2015 sales. And then right click on that secondary axis and choose synchronize. And now you can see I've got my little indicators just to the left of the bars, but they're too close. So I think I just need to adjust this number. So I'm going to double click in my column shelf and maybe make it minus 100,000, or maybe I need to make it minus 1,000,000, something like that. Or heck, it looks like I need to go even more than that, maybe minus 2,000,000. And now I've got nice little indicators next to my bars. I can hide that header and so on and so forth. So that's a great way to put indicators next to your bars. Another way you could do it is I could take, let's see, how else could I do this? So I'm going to go out to the interwebs, and I'm going to go down to, I have a page here for Ascii Symbols. And what I want to do here is, let's see what kind of, let's just go to miscellaneous shapes here and see what we could find. So let's say that we want to use the sunny symbol. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put profitable up here on the shelf. And now we've got true and false, but really what I want to be able to do is I want the trues to be sunny, right? So what I'm going to do here, oh, I might not be able to do this actually because I don't have aliases here. So let's figure this out another way. So I'm going to say 2015 profitable symbol. I'm going to say if profitable 2015, then give me a sunny symbol. Otherwise, maybe I want to use something else. So let's put, who knows what else, maybe this sign right here. Let's try this and see what happens. We can copy and paste that in. We could do else, this symbol, and then end, and hit OK. So maybe we should pick a different one for the positive ones. Let's pick something good here. Let's pick maybe, yeah, let's do the clover. So let's stick that in there. Hit OK. And now I could use this instead on this column. And now we get nice little symbols there. So we've got green for our, and I could even format this and center align them to make it look a bit better. And now if I shrink this column up, you'll see I can get nice little KPI indicators next to those. So I'm just using Ascii symbols in that case. Pretty cool. I like that one. All right, in my next example, what I want to do is I want to be able to label and color the top N. So first off, I want the user to be able to pick the ones they want to label. So, for example, they may want to color and label just the top 5. So how can we do that? Okay, first off, let's go ahead and let's click on the arrow next to our dimensions and create a parameter. So I'm just going to call this top N, and I'm going to make it an integer. And let's just leave everything else the same. Let's just default it to the top 5. So now I've got this top N parameter, so let's show that. And I can type whatever I want in here, 10, whatever. But this won't do anything until we tell Tableau what to do with it. So what I need to be able to do now is create a calculation. So I'm going to create a calculated field. I'm going to call it sales to highlight. And I'm going to say if the rank of our sum of sales corrected is less than or equal to our parameter, or actually that's all I need to do. I don't have to do anything else. I could just make it a true false. Hit OK. And now I should have a field down here. What did I call it? What did I just call that field? I called it, oh boy, where did it go? I lost my field here. Okay, sales to highlight, there we go. So let's drag that onto the color shelf. And we notice that it sets to table down, but I always like to fix my calculations here. And what I want to do is I want to calculate the rank by product subcategory. So that's good. So now, I can mess around with these colors, maybe make that one light, maybe make those blue, something like that. And now if I change this number and maybe make it top 10, you can see the 10 bars are highlighted or set it back to 5. Okay, so that highlights the bars, but really what I want to do is I want to only show the label, so the sum of sales corrected, for those top N bars. So to do that, I'm going to create another calculated field. I'm going to call it sales label. And I'm going to say if sales to highlight, so basically I'm saying if the sales to highlight equals true, then give me the sum of sales corrected. End. And again, I'm doing an end because I don't want to return anything else for the sales I do not highlight. So hit OK. And now I've got this sales label, which I drag that onto the label shelf. And again, set my table calc to be OK. It remembered that. Excellent. But now that I have that, I can go ahead and maybe I want to left align these labels or something like that. And now I'm only labeling those top N. So if I change this to, again, maybe I make it the top 7, something like that, I'm only seeing the label for the top N. So it's a neat way to kind of put focus on particular items in the visualization. Okay, so my next use case here is about sorting. And what I want to do in this case is I want to be able to sort one dimension to the top, but I want all other measures to be sorted by the measure value. So in other words, let's say that I want labels to be first, and I want everything else to sort in descending order. So to do that, I'm going to again create we already have a parameter for subcategory, so let's leave that here. And let's pick labels because that's the one I was just talking about. So now I need to create a calculated field, and I'm just going to call it sort subcategory. And what I want to say is I want to say if my pick a subcategory is equal to my subcategory, then I need to return a certain value. So what I want to do is I want to return, let's say I can make it anything I want, really. I'm going to make it minus a million, whatever. Otherwise, I want to return sum of sales corrected. End. Okay. So in this case, what I'm doing is okay. So I'm getting an aggregation issue here. Okay. So I want to do that. Like that. Okay. So now this is going to return a we know that this one is going to be the biggest one. So we want that to be first. Otherwise, we want to do sales corrected. So let's see what that does. I don't think it's quite right yet, but now that I have that field, I can sort my product subcategory in descending order by my sales. Where's my sort subcategory, right? And hit OK. And notice how labels is at the bottom. So we've got that backwards, right? So let's do, where is it here? Sort subcategory. So instead of doing minus a million here, what we want to do is basically if they return labels, we want to get the max with a level of detail expression, max sum of sales. So that's going to give me the overall, it's going to add up all the sales and then take the total of that. Already engaged. Oh, max sales. All right. So basically we want to say, look at the entire view and bring back the max sales. And let's just make that a really big number. Let's multiply that by 1,000,000 and hit apply. And there we go. So now we have labels at the top and everything else sorted in descending order. So pick paper, we pick rubber bands, whatever it might be, everything else will be sorted. The one you pick will be sorted to the top and everything else will be sorted to the bottom. All right. So that's how you sort one specific dimension to the top. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is now that I have that option, I want to sort. I want to show just the top 10 and highlight the subcategory I choose. Okay. So all right. So we need to basically put a filter on this. So what I'm saying is I want to show only the top 10 or maybe the top n. We've already have a top n parameter, so let's reuse that. So I want to say, oh no, don't we already have this here? We have a rank. Where is my sales filter? So this one, if I look at this is, nope, that's the wrong one. Where is my sales? So sales to highlight, for example, here. So this is looking at my ranking, right? So if I drag that into the filters and we choose true, you'll notice how I only get the top 7, but my computer peripherals is gone. So we need to account for that. Okay, so how do we do that? So I'm going to call this my rank and highlight filter. Oops. So what I want to say is, first off, I want to say my sales to highlight. So I could say equals true, but I'm just going to leave that. I'm going to say or my subcategory, product subcategory is equal to my pick a subcategory. So both of these will return true conditions. So now this is barking at me, so cannot mix aggregate and non-aggregate. Okay, so let's just wrap this in an attribute. Okay, and there we go. And now I have a field called, what did I just call it? I'm drawing a blank here today. I called it my rank and highlight filter. Let's drag that to the filter shelf, pick true, and there we go. So let's edit our table calc and make sure it's working correctly. Yep, so we want it to do it by product subcategory. So table down, yep. All right, and now if we change this to maybe the top 10, oops, I messed that up, sorry. So this needs to be compute table down, pick true. Okay, there we go. So now that there's a top 10, so computer peripherals is in my top 10, so that's why I still have 10 marks. If you look down here on the bottom left, you'll see I've got 10 rows and 1 column. But let's say that, so I know the computer peripherals looks like it's ranked 1, 2, 3. Let's say we would just want the top 4. So let's change this to 4. And what you'll notice is I now have 5 marks because I have my top 4, but I also have computer peripherals at the top. So that's a good way to pick an option to show based on the parameter, but also keep the one that you picked in the view. All right. So in this particular case, I need some big ass numbers to compare the current year with the prior year. but it also needs to be able to update dynamically to the next year. Okay, so essentially for each of these regions, I want to return the sales for the latest year, and then I want to return the sales for the prior year, and then I want to show a comparison of those two. Okay, great. So the first thing I want to do is I want to call this sales for latest year. And in this case, what I want to do is I want to say if my year of order date is equal to the max of my year of order date. So in this case, the max is going to return the max year in the entire data set. Then I want to return my sales. End. Actually, let's do else 0 because we're going to need it for comparisons later. Hit OK. And now I have this field called sales for latest year, and I drop that in the view, and notice how I get my, okay, I'm using the wrong sales field. Sorry about that. So this should be sales corrected. Sales corrected. Remember, we fixed that earlier. And now you'll notice how I'm getting just the data back for the latest year. Okay, great. So actually, let me rename that field to current year sales. And then I'm going to duplicate that for prior year sales. So let's duplicate and edit. And I'm going to call this PY sales. And in this case, what I want to say is the date part of year, same thing, but here I just want to do -1 on my year. And hit OK. And now I have prior year sales, and if I put that on the measure values shelf, you'll see that I get the sales for the prior year. I can now take year out of the view, and I can move measure names to the columns, and I have current year and prior year. So now that I have the two of those, I can calculate my year-over-year change. So to do that, I'm going to take the sum of my current year sales minus my prior year sales, and I'm going to divide that by the sum of my prior year sales. Hit OK. And now I have a field called year-over-year change, but I need that expressed as a percentage. So I'm going to change the default number format to 1 decimal place percentage. And there we go. So now another neat thing we might want to do is notice how my numbers say have a negative in front of the negative change, but they don't have anything in front of the positive change. So I'm going to change my default number format, and I'm going to go into the custom option. And this allows me to say, you know what, I want a plus when it's positive, and then I want to have a negative when it's negative. Hit OK. And now I have that, and I can just make my text nice and big. And I can maybe make these, 18 point, whatever we want to do, something like that. And now I've got my big ass numbers to compare current and prior year sales. So that is all that I have for today. It is 2:54. Thank you for listening. And I will be back next week with another set of tips. Thank you very much. Have a great day.